Hello, everyone. Welcome to another Leger Academic Committee series. I hope everyone's doing well this day, wherever you are. And if you're in Toronto, it's this beautiful sunny day that we have here. So we hope you'll be able to get out and enjoy some of the day before winter comes. Today, I'm joined with an old friend and colleague and a mentor, Dr. Alan Middleton. He is one of the original academic committee members, and we are glad to be working with him. I know a number of you know him already, but just, the best way to describe him, he is a author, speaker, and all-around good guy when it comes to this world. Officially, he's an independent consultant, writer, and speaker on marketing and mentorship. He's a former professor of marketing at the Schulich School of Business at York University. He is a longtime mentor and mentee, but mentor to many, many people and organizations. And he's the author of Mentorship Matters, now more than ever. So we are proud to have Alan join us again. Alan, welcome to the Leger Academic Series.
Always good to be with Leger.
Excellent. And in case everyone hasn't heard, just going to follow up on an announcement we put out this morning. We are very proud to have acquired Insights West, which is a Vancouver-based research company. We put the announcement out this morning, following up on our acquisition of RESAC, a digital agency, last month. So we are happy to have them join us, and a number of the people who work there join this I almost called it a podcast, this webinar today. So let me just share my screen, and Alan's going to take us through a little bit when it comes to mentorship.
Indeed.
Alan, let me know if you can see that there.
I can see that there. Oops.
Excellent. I will make you the presenter, and you are off and running.
Excellent.
Welcome.
Oops, I'm just going to check that it's moving forward. It is. Okay. Good. Is the screen good for everybody?
It sounds good. Oh, and just very quickly, if you have any questions, you will notice on the right hand of your screen, there's a little box there, and one of the tabs is questions. Please type your questions into there, and Alan and I will see that and be able to answer those questions. And we'll get to them at the end or as we go along, however it seems appropriate while we're going through it. If you have any technical questions, it's also a good place to put that information. And Jessica, our technical expert, is keeping track of everything from that end. All right, Alan, you're set to go.
Thank you, and welcome everybody. I hope wherever you are, your day is as nice as Dave mentioned. It's beautiful here, but I'm delighted to be with you. I started working on this book a couple of years ago, just before the pandemic, and then really got going as we went into the pandemic, because boy, that's why the subhead really makes sure. It's now more than ever is for sure. So let's go. And if it was volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, in other words, VUCA, before then, it's now more than ever. You think about what we've all done since March 2020. Let's look at some of it. Enormous business disruption, especially in accommodation, food service, arts, entertainment. I'm going to my first live symphony concert tonight. And people transportation, you think about the difference it's made getting around, but the airlines and Air Canada's hoping we come back. We are coming back, the good news, but we've got increasing inflation. You'll see a lot of news reports about the cost of living going up. And Canada has very high personal debt, 183% of annual revenue, but also high savings, and we got a split world. Online business meetings, you're all in Zooming or a GoToMeeting or whatever it is. And if I just put up the numbers for Zoom, how its revenues have rocketed in the last year. And then education and retraining issues. Now we're all pretty well doing this a lot of the time. There is some return in some universities to in-classroom and some training sessions. And we will get back to more of that, but it's more and more difficult, and there's more and more online. So you've got a whole bunch of pressures on people as we go through this world. And so what happens in the workplace? And this is why what I call the work from anywhere future. Oops, I'm going backwards, not forwards. There we go. The work from anywhere future. So 43% in a September research this year expect future work to be ongoing, a mix of remote and on-site. Now, if you're in some industries, it's not going to be possible to be online. So this is primarily service industry. 10% even expect mostly remote. Only 17 expect on-site only. And last December, there were almost 30% of the workforce working from home. And it may go to as much as 30% on an ongoing basis. Why is that important? Well, it's important because, you know, it's more and more difficult to connect with people. Technology can help us. Here's a list of some of the stuff that's happening in technology. Not just AI, but autonomous mobility, blockchain. You can see the list. We've seen an acceleration in these industries as well, as people have recognized there's a new world we're inhabiting, both at work, but also at home. And a lot of robotics and cobotics, combination of people and robots together, working on this. I want to recommend a book, and yeah, I recommend mine, but I'm going to recommend a more important one. It's called Humanocracy, and it's written by a colleague of mine at London Business School, together with his partner, who used to run Microsoft and Amazon in Europe. And what they're talking about, and we'll see how this is important to mentorship, is the old bureaucratic way of doing things is too costly. In their book, Humanocracy, they calculate that about 1.7 trillion US dollars gets wasted by the global 500 biggest corporations by unnecessary rules, procedures, and levels. So what they put up here is the difference between bureaucracy and what they're calling where we're going to move to. Influence rather than power, for instance. Strategy based on internal conversations rather than setting top down. And I won't go through all of them, but as we see more teamwork, flattened hierarchies, more judgment based on achieving targets rather than process, and getting rid of some of the old bureaucratic nonsense that all organizations have. Within that environment, however true or not true it becomes, it's a move to valuing mentorship more and more as a management capability. And I'll quote something that happened in Ontario, which is in the early days of the pandemic, there was some need for responses between a drug company that I'm quite familiar with, about 4 or 5 of the major hospitals in the government. And the conclusion was it's going to take too long to do. So they called the Premier, and the Premier said, I'll make it happen. And they got through the bureaucracy and made some of the early response to the pandemic faster. And that's what we need to keep doing. And that's what Humanocracy is about. Mentorship takes that and helps us become, to quote Shakespeare, we know what we are, but we know not what we may become. And what we need to do is to touch on that. And in talent development, Canada does badly. I'll show you some numbers in a minute. But we're either 13th in the world or 28th in the world, depending on the survey, on the money and the time our organizations spent on developing their talent. And where does talent come from? Well, obviously it comes from your own direct experience. And then on the right of the screen, as you look at it, it comes from both formal and informal learning. Formal learning through universities, qualifications, training sessions, informal through good contacts and listening to people and watching other people and how they work on the job. But a critical fourth part of all this is mentorship and coaching. And that's where we need to really start improving. So what is mentoring? Well, here's what the Harvard Business Press say it is. It's the offering of advice, information, or guidance by a person with useful experience, skills, or expertise for another's individual's personal and professional development. We'll talk a little about this a little more, but note two things about this. It doesn't say it's older teaching younger, because in this day and age, let me tell you who my students were mentoring, and it was me in areas like social marketing, when I discovered 10 years ago that my use of Facebook made me very old-fashioned to my students. But the other thing it says, it's both personal and professional development. This notion that somehow we are two people, one at work and one at home, is a nonsense, and it's got to go away. And mentorship is about helping people on their journey, whether it's work or other things in their life. We talked about mentorship and coaching, and there's a role for both. And here I just very quickly look at some of the traditional views of coaching and mentoring. Mentoring is, in a summary, much more driven by the individual, much more driven by the mentee. Coaching comes a lot of the background, and coaches, don't hit me, and you know, we've got a lot of people who do this. It comes from a lot of sports saying, here's how you correct your swing or your kick or whatever it is, because of study. So there is this notion of a coach more instructing an individual. Mentorship is more about guidance and nudging by the mentor to the mentee. It's all a combination of both. But there, and you have access to the material, so I won't pain by going through it all. What value does it have? Well, in the career. So we'll talk in a minute about two forms of mentorship: internal, within the organization, and external, where you can go to outside bodies like the American Marketing Association Mentor Exchange, or a number of startup mentorship experiences for indigenous groups and people like that. For career help, it encourages new ways of thinking and acting. It's not the mentor telling the mentee, here's what you do. It's, here's what I've learned, and how do you apply it in your position? So again, it's that sense of the mentee being in charge. There is coaching. There's some teaching, training, and feedback on, you know, if there's a particular skill set, if it's accounting, or if it's marketing, or if it's research. Inside, and especially for career, there's exposure and visibility. You're generally getting around to meet people who have influence. They may be senior, they may be not senior, but important in the organization. Why is this important? Very important in a virtual world. Onboarding organization is a huge challenge. And you have some organizations like Shopify, for instance, who set up people to help people onboard virtually. Because you don't go to that old provincial the phrase about the water cooler and just chat to people. So the danger with bad onboarding is that people only focus on people in their role, and they're not understanding the breadth of what the organization does and what other people in the organization do. What mentorship can do in a career sense internally is help give people an experience of across silos, across the lines of responsibility, introduce people to each other. Shopify does very well at this. They get people to meet with other people online and encourage them to do so and follow up. It can be protective. It can support as a buffer of criticism. You know, you work for a manager who's a little unfortunate, you know, perhaps it gives them a chance to if you like, soften the blow a little. Remember that humanocracy chart. Increasingly, we're not looking for people to follow rules. Yeah, there's a little bit of that, but mostly these days it's about working with people to achieve goals and come up with innovative solutions themselves. There's a form of mentorship called sponsorship. In fact, there's a very good book by a Harvard professor saying that this is the future. I don't agree with this. Sponsorship is where a powerful person sees some very bright people and, if you like, brings them on in their career. My problem with that is twofold. It's only for the select few, and it helps the person who's doing it and building their staff better than it's helping the individuals who are being helped. But there's no doubt that mentorship help in career is really important. But the literature calls psychosocial, or so it's not psychos, it's social values. Helps give acceptance and confirmation. It's supportive, giving respect. Everybody owes respect for doing something. And what mentorship encourages is nudging people's confidence in that area. It can provide counseling. It can provide friendship. It's interesting, of the 12 mentees I've had through the AMA, I'm still in touch with 10 of them. And particularly, I was telling Dave earlier, particularly groups that are, or individuals that are either recent immigrants to Canada or recent immigrants to Toronto or to Montreal or to somewhere. I remember one of my mentees had moved from, she'd spent all her life in Nova Scotia, and there was a whole bunch of the Toronto landscape. So what's a Loblaws? You know, she didn't know those things. So even simple things like that. And then hopefully some role modeling, though don't look at me for role modeling. I'm a distinctly bad idea at that. But we can certainly talk about successful behaviors, attitudes. It doesn't mean following the rules. It doesn't mean giving up what you believe in. It just says, listen, this is the way the culture works in this organization. The culture works here. Just be aware of it. I mentioned it could be two types, internal and external. Internals within the organization, obviously. And the opportunity may be, if you work in organizations like some of the banks have very good mentorship programs, but I'll sing out one of the best around, in addition to Shopify, is IBM. IBM has had superb training and mentorship programs for a number of years, and they really help people connect across silos. Anybody interested in that? This is a plug in my book, Mentorship Matters. There's a case history of an IBM executive and her mentorship experience. Managed well, it not only provides opportunities for the mentee and the mentor, but it teaches the mentor as well, because it's part of management skill now to be able to do that. And the organization benefits by getting rid of some of that bureaucracy that I talked about earlier. External mentorships often form around professional organizations like the American Marketing Association, but also it helps with different professional groups or friendship groups or ethnic groups to give greater diversity or experience in gender. So, for instance, Scotiabank has a women's initiative program where they're encouraging female entrepreneurs by giving them mentorship with successful female entrepreneurs. Most important, it's cross-organizational. It gets you learning from mentorship for people outside your immediate occupation and maybe even outside your industry, because great ideas travel and need to travel. The danger of the world that the book Humanocracy talks about so much is over specialization. Yes, we need to specialize, but great ideas come from many places and from many industries. So let's talk about how it's evolved. I mentioned one way mentorship's evolved, and that's because it's no longer old people teaching young people. So it's no longer just old farts like me. Anybody who's got a particular skill can mentor somebody else. The old way, mentors tended to pick mentees. Nowadays, the mentee has much more power about who they go after, who they get selected with. The mentor traditionally was more senior. Now, as I mentioned, much flatter. There used to be that the mentor need to have similar background to the mentee. That may still be important when you're talking about indigenous groups. It may be still important with immigrants or some professional areas. So you want some legal expertise if you're going to be a legal mentor to somebody. But it's broader than that now. The whole point about mentorship is it can be any age and engaging a multiple of disciplines. It's no longer just one-on-one. You can have group mentorship. I like the one-on-one part, but there are group orientations as well. Mentors don't give instructions, they give suggestions and nudges. And the mentee has to make their decision up. That's why it's part of a flattening hierarchy. So mentors are more of a sounding board, and the mentor assists the mentee in their decisions, does not make them for it. And you can be both. I'm both. I'm both a mentor this year, again, but I'm also a mentee to a number of people whose capabilities I really respect and admire. So why is it a key management skill? And we're almost there, and then lots of time for questions. In this flattened world, and this is the crux of why I wrote the book and why I think this is important, the ability to motivate and develop individuals and teams to achieve better thinking and achievement is critical in a VUCA world. You know, it used to be in my youth, decades ago, that change was moderate, sort of expected, but it didn't happen very much. Now it's constant. So you need to be constantly reassessing. I remember 30, 40 years ago teaching strategy as if it was a fixed point over 3 years. Now, just like Leger's been acquiring organizations, you need to move with the capabilities and the opportunities that present themselves now straight away. You still need a vision, a mission and goals, but you need to be flexible enough to move around. Very important in that, and here's one of the other big hits against bureaucracies and long hierarchies, is their long hierarchies from the customer. You think about what used to happen. The customer dealt with somebody, and if that somebody who's the employee wanted to get something done on behalf of the customer, they had to go through several levels to get it done. I lived in Japan for a while, had a wonderful experience with one very large Japanese retailer who totally transformed their fresh food ordering system so that the frontline people in the fish department at the end of the day or during the day would say, lot of demand for this new fish that we don't usually stock, and the system would send it through to even a new supplier to get that fish in for the very next day. And that's because they were listening to the frontline people. And that's going to become more and more important to get rid of the hierarchy. I mentioned IBM. Sophie Stanton was the case in the book. She's IBM Chief Marketing Officer in the Middle East and Africa. She's French. And she says organizations need people who continually learn and adapt. And mentorship is a critical part of that. IBM did a survey at the end of 2020 of 9 countries, indicating what attracted great talent. There's work-life balance, and I mentioned that at the top at 51%, and key advancement opportunities. But look, in their top 5 were continuous learning opportunities. And also to break down this barrier with home life, that work-life balance, but also ethics and values becoming much more important. What else? Need for greater innovation in this world. And greater innovation, more customer orientation and fresher thinking. Yes, we all need to eventually agree to do something and get on with it. And the way we get on with things needs to have new ways of thinking as well as what you're getting on with. So listening to people from the front line and all the way through that can get better or come up with new ideas. Mentorship can help pass that process on in an organized but unbureaucratic way. Mentorship means, and in groups and anything, focusing on achievement, not process. You know, in a funny way, the Industrial Revolution in the 19th and 20th century was so critical in transforming so many cultures around the world, particularly the West, as long as Japan, Korea, and some others. But they set up processes to follow, because we set up the people who worked in the car plant or the steel plant were told exactly what to do. And it was very efficient. We're beyond that world. We're at least in 2.0, if not industry 3.0. in which case we need to stop following unnecessary rules and be part of inventing new ways to do things. And that's a key skill both mentors and mentees learn. And it helps doing complex principles. Skill shortages. The other area to attract skills is that you're going to be treated better and treated and learn better. And I mentioned earlier where we stood, and I put some of the surveys there. You know, I'm astonished when I listen to organizations tell me that they can't get the staff and they don't have an internal process for retraining, development, and mentorship. And I'll criticize the financial sector with this. Some of our large financial institutions have high turnover when they onboard people in junior roles. And as they gradually try to find out why, they assumed that they were doing the hiring wrong. Well, it wasn't. The research said, and I was involved in research in this area, the research said people joined and they were never developed beyond the specific role that they had. There was no sense of career. There was no sense of ongoing development, no sense of that I can develop further. That's astonishing. You know, if we have got labor shortage, for heaven's sake, let's upgrade skills of the people that we're dealing with. So I'm going to end up on some thoughts to follow and throw out, and then it's over to you. Steven Spielberg said the delicate art of mentoring somebody is not creating them in your own image, but giving them the opportunity to create themselves. Right on. But the next one's my favorite. She's quite a well-known Mexican actor, and it's dead right. Mentoring is a two-way street. The mentor gets wiser while mentoring, while the mentee gains knowledge. And that's why I think this is so important. The three beneficiaries of great mentoring are the mentee, obviously, the mentor, and the organization, for the reasons we've talked about. Flattening hierarchies, greater innovation, greater commitment by people, and listening to them. And a management skill is not ordering people to do things, but motivating and exploring the right things. Even Churchill said sometimes courage is shutting up, though I think Churchill did more talking than shutting up, but anyway, I'm allowed to say that. Old Greek philosopher, we have 2 ears, 1 mouth, so that we can listen twice as much as we speak. So let's remember that. But the key in all this, and I'm going to go back, there and there and there. So why is this important? It's a management skill that benefits the mentor, benefits the mentee, and with it allows or helps the organization evolve in this VUCA, constantly changing world. Dave.
Excellent. Thank you, Alan.
Conversation going.
That was great. Very clear. I'm just going to remind people there is a question tab on the right. You can jump in. I'm going to pause showing my screen and do a little bit here. So let's take some of these questions while we're running through. But I think the first thing that comes out is if I am listening to you and it's clear the importance of being a mentor or being a mentee, how does someone start this relationship? So if I am a mentee and I think I'd like to get some mentorship, or if I'd like to, I mean, obviously AMA has programs where you can sign up and you're matched. Canadian Public Relations Society has programs like this that I've been part of. But outside of the formal ones, how do we get that network started?
Good question. It can be both informal and formal. Most important thing is, where do you think you need, what might you need nudging? What skill development? Is it mostly, it should be professionally oriented. So, you know, mentors are not psychiatrists. So it's not solving every problem. But as I said, it is both social and work. But decide where you mostly need the focus and the help. Once you've got that, think about your connection list. You know, think about the people you know. It might be within your organization. It might be through associations like the AMA or the ones that you mentioned. And then if there isn't a formal organization, call them, write to them, send them an email saying, here's what I'm looking for. Here's the kind of thing I'm looking. Would you be prepared? Or if you don't have time, who would you recommend I talk to? And the third way of going about it, if you've got a good relationship at work, but not necessarily with a mentor relationship, ask your boss and your boss's boss. Who in the, I really need some help in, let's say, the sales area. I'm a good accountant, I'm doing well, but I feel I need to know more in my organization about the selling role. Who should I talk to in the sales group who might be able to give me some stuff? So use the organization to suggest people to you. Use your networks and your friends. The one advantage we have of the social media world is with LinkedIn, with a number of things, you can get in touch with people. And also be careful of security and issues like that. But you can also potentially contact them directly and ask people directly. So there's ways of doing it. But the first most important step is figure out what areas you really would appreciate the advice or help in.
Great, that's excellent. Okay, so now, and Christine Sesdick has a question for you here. Given that, because I think this ties into her question quite well. The idea is that an effective mentor is assisting mentees to help them make decisions by giving suggestions and not instructions.
Right.
Do you have any recommendations for resources for mentors to learn how to ask better questions and probe and nudge? Because we've grown up in this bureaucratic, hierarchical world where we're told how to tell people what to do. How do we learn how to be more effective and respectful at nudging and asking the right questions?
Okay, good point. Shameless self-promotion. There's the book. Mentorship Matters. That's my book, which is available at Amazon.com, and it costs you something like $10 or $12, and they'll send it to you either online or in hard copy. So Amazon, thanks to the AMA who published it. But if you want a little more detail, here's the one I'd recommend. And let me just read it out. It's by a lady who's a member of the Mentorship Association in the United States called Ann Rolfe, R-O-L-F-E. And it's called Mentoring, Mindset, Skills, and Tools. And it's published by an organization that specializes in that called Mentoring Works. And then the other one I'm going to mention is IBM's book. I mentioned that in my view, IBM's one of the great leaders in training in general and mentorship. Yeah, they're a tough organization inside. They work people really hard, but they're really committed to developing their people. And they created this book a number of years ago, and I'll read it out for you, called Intelligent Mentoring: How IBM Creates Value Through People, Knowledge, and Relationships. And there's 3 authors, and it's published by IBM, I think. Hang on, let me double check. Yes, it's published by IBM Press and Pearson PLC. And it's very good. It's how IBM goes about mentorship. Combination of those 3, there are lots of others, my bookshelves are full of them, but be good places to start.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so besides having the right questions to ask, is there a culture of business where you need to work on the emotional intelligence of people within the organization? This comes from Brenda Vanass from Leger. Is there this culture where you have to work hand in hand with mentoring, but also giving people the opportunity to be better at emotional intelligence?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, it's one of the great values to the mentor of mentoring relationships. But let's say people are low on the EQ scale and not very great at that. And they're your direct bosses, and it's within the culture. That's the opportunity to go for the external relationships, the outside, and there are now so many. I counted when I was doing the book, there are about 3,000 different forms of external mentorship program around. Virtually every ethnic group, every profession has a way of doing that. So what you may do, if you face a culture internally that's a little light on the EQ level, maybe that's a time to go to one of the outside sources. Or inside, look around. What other departments, what other groups seem to be doing too well, and make use of them. There are always people that do get this. And one of the things that happens, because it has value to both mentor and mentee, you'll find more and more people trying to do it. And then the other thing is there are courses on coaching and mentoring. A number of the people I used to run the executive training group at the Schulich School of Business called SEEK, the Schulich Executive Education Center. And we had some absolutely spectacularly good coaches working for us who also operate as mentees. So there are people around, they could have gone through professional coaching training, but others have picked it up more informally, but are absolutely great at this as well.
Well, I love the way our questions are falling out, because it seems like we're telling the story as we go. So these people who are great at being mentors, Tamara Weinberg sent in a question. She's a chair for a mentorship program. And she's having challenges recruiting mentors.
Yes.
Do you have any? So there's all these great people out there, and a lot of times mentorship mentee relationships come about informally. But how do you find people to sign up for a program where they're going to be designated as a mentor?
Yeah, no, it's a very good question. What there is not, other than Mentor Exchange, which is the AMA program, I'm not aware of too many mentorship associations that provide training in this area.
Yeah.
There are in the States, and the woman I mentioned, Anne Rolfe, works for Mentoring Works, which is a group that does that. Here in Canada, we're less developed in this area. So what I would do is contact me, or contact people that you've come across in organizations who impress you. Ask them. They may not think they're good at mentoring, but they've got the capability and the skills. And most important, what do people tell you about who they work for? That can always give you a great clue. Now, in your place, I'd look for somebody who's got both a little more formal training as well as informal, but look for both and talk to people who've been, who was important in your development. Talk to people you trust, who helped bring them on. And that's maybe how you find out where people are.
Is some of that because Canadians are more modest and we don't think that we, because and I'm sort of joking, but I'm not joking. And a lot of the mentorship mentee relationships I've ended up with, it's because people have done what you've said. They've sought me out. We've talked, and it's become this ongoing relationship for years. Absolutely. In some ways, where I'm learning from them, they're learning from me. But it didn't start with me signing up for a program to say I want to help someone. So
one thing our American partners do really well, if they see an opportunity to develop something, they develop it very quickly.
Yeah.
So there's more formal organizations. Some of the coaches organizations will be formal, but to Dave's point, it's the modesty, but it's also, do you want to overcommit yourself and things like that? So you've got a whole bunch of reasons you may not set yourself up that way. And it's because I think we've been a little slower than some other groups around the world in thinking about mentorship as a management skill training for the mentor. It's always been assumed it's more one way to the mentee. In the world we're inhabiting, it isn't. So if you think about, I've had good relationships, I seem to bring on people, maybe I should do that more because it helps my management skill. And I think that's the breakthrough that's needed.
Yeah, and I also think, you talk about now more than ever. We use that word a little bit. With all of us, and you talk about the number of people working from home these days, and you onboard and you work from home. So that opportunity to learn sort of through osmosis by
Yep.
being around people, the water cooler or just being in the office is gone, and you really become these little islands. So unless beyond the mentorship, it's a way to tie yourself into other people and create more of a positive network and be able to grow from that.
Absolutely. One of the things Shopify did was they set up a special group, and their job was to onboard people by introducing themselves to people across the organization. And they were allowed to set up quite senior contacts, and the senior people had to agree to do it. And because they recognized with their policy and their likelihood that they won't even be switching to much in person in the future, they need to set up an online version of this. So it needs to be informal as well. So one of the things I mentioned, I'm mostly a fan of individual mentorship, but I'll tell you where group mentorship can be valuable, which is you find people with shared viewpoints and you mentor each other, and you can use their connections. So they're like mini friendship groups. You can use their connections to seek out other people to mentor you, as well as the other people in the group. So looking for that, that's where group mentorship can be doubly valuable.
Okay, so now a potential negative side. Can an organization force this? So create mentorships. I'll say, well, you're automatically going to mentor this person, or this person's part of your group. Or does it have to be something that's more organically evolved?
It can be two things, but you're right. The more formalized you make it, the more dangerous it becomes of going back to the old, more bureaucratic. But it does need some organization. So, for instance, I'll use the AMA, Mentor Exchange, as an example. There's a criteria that you fill in, what you're looking for. It's not just one word, what you're looking for. It's who you are, how much experience you've had, what kind of experience you're looking for. So they have a professional matching that matches the criteria set by the mentee with the criteria that's been described by the mentor. So that's good. That happens. It often that helps guide, but it also happens informally. So if you think about, the checklist, and that is why important are the questions that you want to find out and ask, you get a sense of who it is you're dealing with. And there will be some that don't work for various reasons. This isn't a perfect matching process, but it does, ideally, it can work from an informal contact, and often those are really valuable. But mentorship is also a process that is ongoing. And that's why a bit of formal matching and a bit of formal thinking about what it needs, and it can go on through life. In my book, I talked about some famous mentors, Socrates and Plato, and in music composition, a number of areas. And this can go on through your whole life. And there's lots of examples of people who've been mentored and had mentee relationships through 50, 60, 70 years.
That's fantastic. Alan, we're at the 45-minute mark. Thank you very much for today. And as I said, you have always been a positive mentorship force in my career, and I appreciate that. And will continue to be. And thank you. So thank you, everyone else.
The only people I ever go to for information and research are Leger, and particularly Dave.
Thank you for that, Alan. Thank you, everyone else, for joining us. This is the second in our series of Leger's Academic Committee. Next month, we'll have Dr. Chuck Chakrapani talk about how talking about how technology is affecting all of us. There'll be more information as it gets closer to the date, but please, you'll get information after this. You can sign up for that one, and we hope to have you all back for that. Everyone who online is a part of Leger, we will have a private session with Dr. Middleton at 1 o'clock. So we'll give everyone a quick break for 15 minutes, and then for all the Leger team, we'll reconvene at 1 o'clock just to go talk about mentorship a little bit further with our friend Dr. Alan Middleton. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Thank you,
Thank you,
Alan.
audience. Be well and be mentored.